Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, the crisis on the southern border is a Mexican standoff. Who will blink first, Donald Trump or Nancy Pelosi? What is the impact of the government shutdown on Montgomery County? Stay tuned. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by former Majority Leader of the Maryland House of Delegates, John Hurson, Maryland Young Republican National Committeeman Evan Young, and education activist Cynthia Rubenstein. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. The telenovela on the Mexican border continues as Republicans and Democrats dance around, seeking to gain political leverage over one another. Yesterday, President Trump, while on location in Texas, said, "It's not about politics, it's about what's doing right." Now, you know, when any politician starts a statement with, "It's not about politics," he's lying, because what he's really saying is, it's all about the politics. What a spectacle. The government of the United States of America is partially shut down, while the president and congressional Democrats pretend to debate about whom can best determine the methodology to protect our southern border with the nation of Mexico. The president says that, in the opinion of the federal government, a 700-mile border barrier is an essential part to protecting the border. Well, the other side claims that the wall just won't work. Oh, really? Just visit the Great Wall of China for that answer. In reality, it's not about the wall. It's about power. Political power, who has it and who doesn't. This is a real-life Mexican standoff where there may be no winners. Cynthia, in 2017, the U.S. Customs Border Patrol apprehended over 300,000 individuals illegally seeking access to the United States. Who knows how many they didn't apprehend? But clearly, there's a problem. And today, both Republicans and Democrats say they favor securing the southern border. Are either one or both telling the truth?
Well, they're both right. The devil is in the details. And just for some context, the year 2000 was the high point for apprehensions at the border. And at that time, there were 1.6 million. So it's helpful to look at 300,000 versus 1.6 million in 2000. So improvements have been made. And since 9/11, things like technology and a reduction in Mexican migration, as well as more border agents, have helped that come along. What really needs to happen is for the people who know what they're talking about to make their recommendations on what needs to happen to secure the border. And that is not Donald Trump based on one campaign promise that he is trying to keep, which is not based on evidence.
But Cynthia, let's be real. Is it okay for 300,000 people to breach the border? We don't know really how many people come through the southern border. We just know how many people they catch.
Well, look at another side of this issue, which is that there are more people who overstay their visas and are here without
That's
papers.
a deflection, Cynthia. I mean, the issue...
Yeah, I'm setting context for the president proposing that this is a national security emergency and manufacturing and conflating what is happening at the border. There is more of a humanitarian crisis than there is a security crisis.
You're absolutely right. The issue is that the border is porous. And people are trying to gain entry to the United States through a porous border. And so they are taking death-defying and threatening journeys to try to cross that border. Now, Evan, Cynthia brought up the question about the president and his base. There are those that believe the president is shutting down the government just to satisfy Rush Limbaugh and the right-wing base. And if he doesn't do that, he's going to lose their support.
If he backs down from the wall with no assurances that additional fencing, additional barriers will be built, he doesn't lose his base, but they're hanging on by a thread because we're 2 years through the first term now. the campaign promise, they weren't chanting build that wall by accident. People voted for him because many of them wanted that built. And so far, about 124 miles of additional fencing has been approved in these past 2 years. So he still has a long way to go to completing building that barrier along the southern border. So he has a campaign promise to fulfill, but Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer know that also, and that's where their opposition to this comes from. They're not opposed to 0.1% of the budget going to something that Chuck Schumer praised the success of before. He said 630 miles of border barriers did a great job stemming the flow of illegal immigration. So he's not opposed to 700 more. He's opposed to giving Donald Trump anything that helps him fulfill a campaign promise.
John, look, think of this. The number of voters that voted for Donald Trump, they were about 48% of the vote that came in. I mean, Trump didn't win the general popular vote, but those people still are adamant about building the border.
Well, I'm not sure about that, but that's fine. I'll assume that for a
All right,
moment.
but think of this. Put this in the context. You served as majority leader of a legislature.
Right.
You know the different levers of power that might be there.
Right.
This is an unprecedented crisis. How does this end?
I think it ends fairly quickly, and here's how I think it ends. He will declare a national emergency. I think there's some legal basis for him to do that, not that will be approved by the courts, but we'll find out. And then the government will reopen. The point is, I think the more important point here is that he has based his presidency on the creation of this wall. And in the next 2 years, there won't be a wall, okay? He will say he fought as hard as he could for it. He had to go up against Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, but he fought for it. That's going to be the basis of his reelection campaign. And frankly, I think, the court should go along. Fine. Here's
a flaw. Here's a flaw in your rationale. Let's say that he does declare a national emergency, and let's say that it's stopped at the district court level and doesn't go for it. I personally think there wouldn't be subject matter. I don't think the courts have jurisdiction on this, since there is a remedy enunciated in the legislation. They don't have jurisdiction. But let's say it's stopped. Right. Why do you presume that the government would reopen? They still have to agree.
Well,
they still have to agree.
Here's what
they have to agree on the budget.
Good question. My attitude is about if he declares a national emergency, the only reason he would get any benefit out of that is to say, let's reopen the government, because the government is shut down right now. I won't go through all the statistics.
Well, we're going to talk about that in a minute.
But what I'm saying is, that's where he gains something by saying, okay, I'll reopen the government, but I'm taking this to a national emergency level. Let the court, he won't say this, but let the courts decide this, which is what will happen, and he'll probably win.
He's actually indicated that he realizes there will be a challenge if he takes it, if he declares a national emergency.
There will be, and I don't know what the political argument is against those who challenge it. It's like, he doesn't have the authority. It's against the,
Well, the remedy's clear.
The problem.
The remedy is the two houses of Congress can override his declaration. But we're going to go on because there's an immediate impact, and the immediate impact is here in the state of Maryland, in Montgomery County, where the federal government has a significant impact. John, there are almost 150,000 federal employees who work in Maryland. Now let's talk about the long-term implications for the state.
Well, this is a very, very tricky question for Governor Hogan. He has a bunch of federal employees. His state, our state, is more impacted than a lot of other states by what's happening here. So I think there's a lot of pressure, both at the state government with Governor Hogan and with our legislators. You can see them all very active on TV and being, because it is impacting the state. So I think this has political implications for the state.
But it doesn't just impact the employees, it impacts the businesses.
Absolutely.
And Evan, I had breakfast the other day with a small business owner that owns a bakery in Gaithersburg, 7 employees, business is off 25% since the shutdown. They can tolerate such losses for a little while, but they're not Booz Allen. They're not one of the big defense contractors. They can't hold out forever before they start laying off employees. How can the Republican Party of Maryland support the continued shutdown?
Well, I don't think the Republican Party of Maryland wants a shutdown. Governor Hogan was one of the first people to come out and tell Congress, do your job, compromise, work together, keep the government open. So the top Republican in Maryland's been on the forefront of telling Congress not to go the shutdown route, to keep the government open. As far as Maryland goes, Republicans have, Andy Harris out on the Eastern Shore. That's all the power we have when it comes to actually dealing with the shutdown. But we do have Senator Cardin, who last week on MSN or CNN said that barriers work on the border, and Rep. Sarbanes, who said barriers make sense on the border. There are 2 people who have just in the past week admitted that these border barriers work, yet at the same time refuse to fund them and keep the government shut down.
It's the House that's the bottleneck there.
Yeah, and John Sarbanes is not a Democrat standing up saying, although he did say the borders make sense and the barriers make sense, he's not telling Nancy Pelosi, throw the 0.1% of the budget, give up the political battle because the borders work and keep the government open. So
well, the longer the shutdown occurs, and John, again, I'm going to go back to you again because of your experience here. The longer the shutdown occurs, are you going to see? I mean, which side is going to break first? Are House Democrats like Evan is suggesting who have federal employees in their district going to start saying to Nancy Pelosi, $5 billion? That's the pimple on the elephant's ass. Fund the damn thing. Are they going to break?
Well, this is in your next segment because you asked us to predict what's going to happen. I think what's going to happen is you're going to see in the next week, you're going to actually see people realize that there's no reason to fight this anymore, including Trump. He's going to say, look.
So wrong.
Yeah,
I'm
not so wrong.
You are so wrong, so wrong. You don't know who you're dealing with. And as we go to break, I want a prediction from each one of you.
Yeah, which I tried to just do.
I know. How long is it going to last? We'll start with Cynthia, because she's got a great red dress on tonight.
I'm going to say by the time the next round of paychecks are due.
So that's 2 weeks?
2 weeks.
Okay. Evan, quickly.
I think before the end of the month, Nancy Pelosi realizes that $5 billion is less important than getting people back to work.
John.
I think by the end of next week, Mr. Trump realizes he can just declare a national emergency and take care of this problem.
I think the shutdown is going to go on for a long time because there's not enough pain on either side, and Trump won't back down. Stay tuned when we come back from this short break. And welcome back. Now with a slightly lighter topic. When Mark Elrich took office as Montgomery County executive, he asked all departments to cut their budgets by 1.5%. This week, he announced a $25 million budget cut to the Montgomery County school system, about a 1% cut in the budget. Cynthia, the school system has long been Montgomery County's biggest draw, but the proposed cut is rather insignificant to a budget that is $2.6 billion, that's B, billion dollars, so it shouldn't have much of an impact. But yet there are cross currents here. In 2016, Bethesda Magazine talked about the disparity between affluent school districts and poorer school districts, and the impression is that the overall quality is slipping.
Overall, Montgomery County's public school system is still a good school system relative to all other school systems. However, one of the most important things that the county has to address is what happens to kids between the age of 0 and 5 before they enter school. And early childhood education is where Montgomery County needs to pay a lot more money and a lot more attention so that kids who enter school are more ready to learn and have early literacy foundations.
So is this 25 million going to come out of that?
No, it isn't. But what I'm saying
overall?
is, to the question of whether or not our schools are slipping, we do have a growing population of kids who are coming into school and are don't have the same educational foundation, and we really need to front load this issue and focus on more robust and comprehensive early childhood education, because the growth in the school system of the kids who are the most challenged their performance can be most impacted by what happens between the ages of 0 and 5.
All right, I want to go to Evan, because there's also an impact on the attractiveness of our county as a place to live. I've talked to many young families who say they can't afford to live in Montgomery County in the same school district where they grew up, like in Walter Johnson or in Churchill, but they can't find homes in school districts where the education is good and the schools are safe. They're now looking in Virginia. Is this a problem?
It's a problem we've talked on here before. I've mentioned how friends that I went to school with, people I grew up with, as they get married, all the single ones, we're still in Montgomery County, but as people get married, want to start have a family, they go up to Frederick, they go up to Howard County, they start to leave the county. And it's a growing problem. It has two different effects here. First, the educational one. At one point, Montgomery County schools were the best in the state. But now in a number of metrics, according to the State Board of Education, we've fallen behind Frederick County, Carroll County, and Howard County. But then also taxpayer money that is fleeing Montgomery County and going there. $130 million in taxpayer money last year went from Montgomery County, flowed out to Howard County. About $80 million from Montgomery County up to Frederick County. So people are not just taking their kids to schools outside of the county, but they're taking their money too, and that doesn't make for anything improving as far as the conditions
this is
here.
going to be a continuing story, because we got to continue to watch what happens not only with the county budget and Mr. Elrich's performance, but also the county schools. All right, in a rather shocking decision last March, when the Supreme Court sent the Maryland 6th Congressional District gerrymandering case back to the Court of Appeals, and then that court ordered that the district be redrawn before the 2020 election. Now, in a strange turn, the Supreme Court this week announced that it would rehear the case in March. Now, John, the decision to rehear the case was announced just as the independent counsel that Governor Hogan put together was about to start work. So what's going to happen? Should they just throw up their hands and wait till after the 2020 census?
No, I don't think they should. I mean, I think the commission he put together was very bipartisan and also very, balanced. It's the way it should be done. In other words, I've been through these redistrictings, and I realize that the real power is in the governor's office, but the legislature has a big control over this as well. But it would be very, very smart, as he has done, to put together a very, even kind of commission to take a look at this. The Supreme Court, who knows what they're going to do? It's very unknown. They have a North Carolina case that they've added to the docket. They're going to hear the two cases at the same time. The real question is whether or not you can do political gerrymandering. You cannot do racial gerrymandering, but you can, under current law, do political gerrymandering. So you can do what Maryland did, which is basically divide, very strategically, precinct by precinct.
Well, I'm really sorry that our fourth panelist, Liz Vittori, is not here this evening. She was stuck in traffic on I-95 and couldn't make it because she ran in a district for Congress that was extraordinarily gerrymandered, and in parts had to take a boat to connect one another. But I want to change subject for a second, which is yesterday it was announced about the health of the Senate Majority Leader and the House Delegates, Mike Miller. What's impact, John, is that going to have on the remainder of this session?
Well,
we only have about 30 seconds.
Yeah, the remainder of the session, nothing is going to change. I mean, the President of the Senate, Mike Miller, is going through chemotherapy, and for prostate cancer, which is metastasized, which is very serious, but is something that can be cured. So, but politically inside the body of the Senate and inside the legislature, there's going to be discussions about who succeeds him. Not that he's leaving, but that's going to affect conversations.
Last question. No change in dynamics between the General Assembly and the governor?
None.
Just internal?
Just internal.
All right. Stay tuned for Parting Shots when we come back from the short break. Welcome back. Now with Parting Shots, John Hurson.
My thing is a shout out to all the federal employees who live in Montgomery County. We're all hanging in there for you. I think it's going to be over soon in terms of the scare, but we're all praying for you and making sure that we are helpful in any way that we can be.
Thank you. Evan, your Parting Shot.
Yeah, so in case everyone forgot, we're almost $22 trillion in debt. That used to be a big thing when people are campaigning. Debt clock running behind everybody at every campaign stop, talking about the deficit that everyone else is responsible for. Then as soon as it's you that gets to spend the money, forget about all that. So in the debate over the wall, the barrier, the fence, whatever you want to call it, something that's gone sort of unnoticed and has no traction from either party and really proves to me no one's really that serious about solving the problem. Senator Ted Cruz's El Chapo Act. We seized $14 billion from El Chapo when we arrested him last year, and Ted Cruz's El Chapo Act would divert any money we seize from El Chapo, other drug lords on the border, going towards the necessary border security, border barriers, fences, smart technology, and it doesn't spend a dime of taxpayer money. We're squabbling here over $5 billion. El Chapo had 14 that we could use to solve the problem and not add a dime to our debt while doing it. But that's not going to happen because everyone wants to win, not actually solve a problem.
Thank you, Evan. On that cheery note, Cynthia Rubenstein, you get to finish it up.
Well, I have some Maryland news cheer. Actually, it's a shout out to Maryland Matters, which is a news website, which is a phenomenal source for all things Maryland, not only political news, but also education, environment, economic and business matters, and it's headed by two extremely capable and wonderful journalists, and their names are Bruce DuPoit and Josh Kurtz. So I encourage anyone who watches this show and cares about Maryland to follow Maryland Matters.
And you failed to say that Bruce DuPoit, along with Blair Lee, were the founders of this talk show 21.
And my bad.
This week. That's
My bad.
okay. Well, Winston Churchill once said that in politics, when you're in doubt what to do nothing. When you're in doubt what to say what you really think. So, in keeping with that spirit, and I touched on it earlier when we were talking about how long the shutdown is going to last. The political confrontation between the two parties has been building for years, and it will continue because the more conservative or right-wing or Republican, they finally elected someone who was not going to back down, and that's Donald Trump. Whether you like him or you hate him, he won't back down. And so when he called the Senate Majority Leader or Senate Minority Leader and the incoming Speaker of the House into his office in December and embarrassed them publicly, that was done for one reason, to show that he was not going to back down, and this is a fight he intends to win. So we can all be in for a bumpy ride for as long as this continues. So coming up on the stay tuned. I want to thank everybody for being here today. Again, I'm sorry Liz Mattori couldn't be here. And I want to thank the viewers for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.